Hello, thank you for joining me today. I'm sorry that I am not in class. My son has a college virtual visit, so that is the reason I'm not in class today. But we do still have class, so you do need to listen to this recording, take down notes, and then you'll be able to take your assessment when we finish. Okay? So last week we started with lesson 2.02, which is the French Revolution. I'm just going to kind of scroll through these slides here really quickly, the things that we've already covered. Oops. So this is our syllabus. You can see here it is Monday, and we are on the second part of 2.02. You should have read pages 369 to 383 already. If you have not done that, please make sure that you do so before completing the assessment today. Your student guide pages 237 to 248. There's a lot of pages there. You'll notice in the flip video lesson, the answers are all there, and there were some that were extra credit, or not extra credit, I'm sorry, optional. So make sure that you do look at the flip video lesson. We did watch that last week in class. If you have not done that, make sure you do so, okay? Just a quick reminder, you do get 3 attempts on all your assessments. Make sure before you do your first try, you have your student guide workbook done. You've attended our class, ask any questions that you may have during class time. Before your second try, if you don't do very well, make sure that you do have your student guide completed and filled out. If you do not, I will not help you. I'll be happy to help you. That's what I'm here for. But I do need to make sure that you're doing your part as well. So make sure you do have that student guide filled out. And then if you're still having troubles, let me know. You shouldn't need a third try after that. If you do, obviously, we can make arrangements to meet. Okay, we watched the flip video during class time last week, so we're not going to do that. If you do need to watch the flip video, it is posted in your OMS. Go to lesson 2.02 and you will see it in there. Okay, so these were just the slides from the flip video. I'm going to scroll through these. We did go through these on Thursday of last week. Okay, so this is where we started on Thursday. We talked about problems in France. We talked about Louis XVI and how he had convened the Estates General, and we talked about the 3 estates, and we talked about how basically the first and the second estate were kind of making all the rulings for the 3 estates, and the 3 estate had the most people. In class, we did go through and fill in some notes for page 367. We filled in notes for 371, 372. We did again talk about these 3 estates. So if you're not sure, if this doesn't, you don't remember this, make sure you look back at the recording from last Thursday. We did go through all of this in class, and these notes are also posted on the Padlet if you need to go back through. Okay, so we did go through all of this. We talked about storming the Bastille, talked about the revolution beginning. All of these Parisians surrounded this Bastille, stormed through, and then that was history. The French Revolution began. So I believe this is where we stopped in class, Power to the People, page 379. So I'm not going to do this on the recording, but definitely if you would like, you can stop the recording at this point. You can go to page 374 in your book. So if we were having regular class, that's what I would have you do. Go to page 374 and you can look where it says Power to the People. Let me see if I can hold up my webcam here. Where it says Power to the People. You can go ahead and take notes from there all the way up until the blue section. Okay, so if you need to do that, you can. Okay, and this is where I'm going to start kind of the teaching, and then we'll kind of go back and forth between stopping and taking notes. But a good reminder, Enlightenment ideas of the French Revolution. So these Enlightenment ideas were the idea of natural rights, the idea of the right of people to vote for their leaders, and then the idea that people should be free and equal. So these were these kind of Enlightenment ideas that were happening, and they really did kind of catapult the French Revolution. Catapult kind of meaning kind of push people into this idea that, hey, things aren't going right. We're being ruled by this absolute monarchy, and we have no say. And then we're being ruled, we've got the 3 estates, and we do have some say, but this minority, the first estate and the second estate, the very few people are making decisions for the majority, for the rule of them. So they were like, hey, what's going on? We need to kind of take a look at this. All right, and then here is the Declaration of the Rights of Man on page 375. That's this blue section here. What I'm going to do is you can go ahead and write notes if you'd like, or you can just listen. I'm going to read this aloud, so we do have it for those of you that, all of you I'm assuming have read, but these are just some good points to make. So you also had in your student guide the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Let's see, where was that? Page Here, page 248. So you should have page 248 filled out in your student guide, but you can just go ahead and listen as I'm reading this, okay? This is on page 375, and you can follow along if you'd like to. So the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. The National Assembly drew up the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of Citizen in August 1785. Like the American Declaration of Independence issued 13 years earlier, it expressed many ideals of the Enlightenment. Here are 12 of the 17 rights stated in the French Declaration. Okay, so the National Assembly recognizes and proclaims in the presence and under the auspices of the Supreme Being the following rights of man, of the citizen. Men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Social distinctions can only be found upon the general good. Number 2, the aim of all political association is the preservation of the natural rights of man. These rights are liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Liberty consists of being able to do everything which injures no one else. Hence, the exercise of the natural rights of each man has no limits except those who assure to the other members of the society the enjoyment of the same rights. These limits can only be determined by law. Number 6, law is the expression of the general will. Every citizen has a right to participate personally or through his representative in its formation. It must be the same for all, whether it protects or punishes. All citizens, being equal in the eyes of the law, are equally eligible to all dignities and to all public positions and occupations according to their abilities and without distinction except that of their virtues and talents. Number 7, no person shall be accused, arrested, or imprisoned except in the case and according to the forms prescribed by law. Number 10, no one shall be disacquainted on account of his opinions, including his religious views. Number 11, the free communication of ideas and opinions is one of the most precious of the rights of man. Every citizen may accordingly speak, write, and print with freedom, being responsible, however, for such abuses of this freedom as shall be defined by law. Number 12, the security of the rights of man and of the citizen requires public military force. These forces are therefore established for the good of all and not for the personal advantage of those to whom they shall be entrusted. Number 14, all the citizens have a right to decide either personally or by their representatives as to the necessity of the public contribution, which is taxation, to grant this freely, to know what uses it is put, and to fix the proportion, the mode of assessment and of collection, and the duration of the taxes. Number 15, society has the right to require of every public agent an account of his administration. Number 16, a society in which the observance of the law is not assured, nor the separation of powers defined, has no constitution at all. And number 17, property being an inviolable and sacred right, no one shall be deprived thereof except where public necessity, legally determined, shall clearly demand it, and then only on condition that the owner shall have been previously and equitably indemnified, meaning they were compensated or paid back. So that was the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of Citizens. So basically it was saying that, people have rights. Somebody can't just come in and take your property. The military can't just be used against you. That law is an expression of general will. So, there are some laws that pertain to everyday goings. Communication and ideas should be openly spoken within reason, unless someone's abusing them, and then, of course, they may be taken away. So that was the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of Citizen on page 375. Down here. Okay, so again, this is just kind of a recap. The National Assembly drew up the Declaration in August of 1789. There were 17 stated rights. It acknowledged that a supreme being granted that all men were born free and equal in rights. It stated that liberty is the ability of any being able to do something that does not injure another person. The document stated that citizens should have the rights to determine their religious beliefs, and they are allowed freedom of speech. Citizens were granted the right to participate in government personally or through a representative. The role of law is for the general good and an expression of the general will of the citizens, and law are created to protect or punish. All citizens are equal under the law. People can own property, and it cannot be taken from them without due process of law, and it even grants protection from being arrested or imprisoned, except in cases where due process of laws have been used. So that's just kind of a recap of what I just read from page 376. So the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, like the U.S. Declaration of Independence, it drew on the ideas of this idea of natural law, which was that thing we talked about at the beginning, the Enlightenment ideas, from a divine creator. It stated that men are born and remain free and equal in rights. And it also stated that the rights included liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Okay? So that was the French Declaration of Rights of Man and the Citizen, kind of like our Declaration of Independence. Okay, so you can turn to page 377. You can pause this video if you'd like. You can take some notes from that page. I'm going to continue on for the purpose of this recording. So Louis the 16th, he was the grandson of Louis the 15th. He had little talent for governing, meaning he didn't govern very well. He lived in luxury while many of his subjects were poor. Because of this, he was despised. People did not care for him. By 1789, the nation of France was almost bankrupt, and he convened the Estates General to get money for new taxes. And again, this goes along with what we're reading, Louis' plans and plots. The outcome of this meeting led to the rise of the National Assembly, started by the Third Estate, and eventually to the start of the French Revolution. And then after conspiring against the revolution, he and his wife, Marie Antoinette, would be publicly executed by the guillotine. And I did a little bit of research on the guillotine, which was interesting. I think I have a slide on it here, but if not, I'll give you a little bit of information at the end. Okay, so from monarchy to republic, and again, that's page 378, and then that blue box, the guillotine, you can read that on your own on page 378. But what's interesting is when I was reading up about the guillotine and how it kind of came about, there were French doctors that were trying to find a way to make executions more humane. And Dr. Guillotine, which is Guillotin without an E on the end, is the one who it was named after, but he didn't necessarily invent the guillotine, but he was a strong advocate for humane executions. Before the executions used to be a little bit more gruesome, and so he was an advocate for supporting, more humane execution, if there is such a thing. But what's interesting is the guillotine was actually used all the way up until 1982. I was shocked by that. I figured this was like an old world thing, and but yeah, it was used all the way up until 1982. So I was surprised on that. But anyways, you can go ahead and pause this if you need to, and put some more information in there from monarchy to republic, and then this terror and equality, and then the blue box. What did Americans think? The lost often. You can go ahead and write that in here too. Okay, so pause the video if you need to, or you can continue on with us. So trouble outside of France forces a look inside. So this kind of goes on again to this monarchy and republic and terror and equality. I'm kind of tying all of that in addition to what you may have just written for notes from the book. So Louis XVI and his family attempted to flee to Austria when kind of things started getting bad and people were really getting upset with him because the Austrian emperor was the queen's brother. They were captured and brought back to Paris and then executed. So when the news of the execution spread to neighboring countries, many of them, relatives of Marie Antoinette, were outraged. Marie Antoinette was Louis XVI's wife. They also feared that this violence of the French Revolution might spread to their own lands. Many of these kings of these countries all agreed to attack France to put down the revolution. Thousands of Frenchmen joined the army to defend their revolution. France was relying heavily on their army to protect France. And there's a video here on Marie Antoinette. We can go ahead and I can play that another time. Maybe I'll do that at the end of the video. Okay, so you'll be able to watch that. Inside of France, Robespierre and the National Convention worked to complete reforms and to seek out any possible enemies of the revolution and the French state. Excuse me. Maximilien Robespierre. And there's not a section, I believe, on Robespierre in your book, although it does mention it, but he does not have his own section here. maybe a little bit on 383. No, I guess under terror and equality. So when you're typing notes for terror and equality, there's quite a bit there on Maximilien Robespierre, right? So he won the election to the Estates General in 1789. He was a lawyer in his 30s that was willing to take the cases of the poor clients. He was admired for his willingness to represent the poor and for his honesty. He became a leading figure of the revolution. Although he was sickened by the sight of blood and did not attend executions, under his leadership and the revolution, it entered its bloodiest phase. He and his supporters saw enemies of the revolution everywhere that were supporters of tyranny or an enemy of liberty. By spring of 1793, he was acting more and more like a tyrant. He was removed from power and was executed by the guillotine in July of 1794. Okay, so that's Robespierre, and again, page 380 under Terror and Equality is where you'll find more about him. So terror and aftermath. Inside of France, there was a move to arrest any citizen that could possibly be a supporter of the monarch or of those attacking France. Over 40,000 people were killed during this phase using the guillotine. Many citizens were arrested for complaints about food shortages or longing for times in the past. By July of 1794, this period ended with the arrest of Robespierre. He was executed like those he had accused. A 5-man body called the Directory was formed to rule France. However, by 1799, one man would seize power from the Directory. At that point, 10 years had passed since the Bastille had been stormed and the revolution had been started. The revolution was finally coming to an end. So the terror is this period of French Revolution that went from about March 1793 to July 1794. And then during this time is when people were deemed enemies of the revolution, and the people who were deemed enemies of the revolution, they were ruthlessly executed. So it was not a good fate for them. So up to 40,000 people were executed as accused enemies, meaning as they were considered guilty. The guillotine was this is invented by Dr. Guillotine. He was the one that's coined with the name, but there were several doctors that also went in on that in additional research that I did. So it was intended to make an execution as fast, merciful, and painless as possible. The Directory was this 5-man body that came to power after Robespierre was removed from power. The Directory faced many political enemies and even foreign enemies of France. So you can go ahead and in your Human Odyssey book, page 383, Saving the Revolution, you can go ahead again, you can pause the video if you need to, and you can take some notes there. It is hugely important that you are reading your book. So there's lots of additional information that we just don't have time to cover in class. So make sure that you are doing that. All right, so the French Revolution, liberty, equality, and fraternity. French meaning liberty, equality, and fraternity. And then this became the French nation's official slogan. The National Assembly was determined to create a constitutional monarchy. It abolished the old feudal taxes that peasants paid to their landlords. Clergy, nobles, and local lords would have no special tax privileges. The Assembly took away all titles of nobility. It made more than half the adult male population eligible to vote. And then religious toleration for both Protestants and for Jews. And King Louis pretended to cooperate and accept these publicly, but privately he seethed. He was mad. He didn't like them. And he looked for help from his brother-in-law, the Emperor of Austria. And then he continued to plot ways to stop the revolution. Okay, and then again, eventually his demise was met, and he ended up dying on the guillotine. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of this lesson. If you look in your book, if you turn the page to 385, if those of you that were on that last part there, we're going to move on to Napoleon. So this is what we're going to study in the next lesson. So Napoleon, he was this young officer of the French army. He won great victories for France on foreign fields of battle. The Directory believed they could control and use him for their purposes. In 1799, he would seize power from the Directory, and then eventually he would wield as much power as a king. And we're going to learn about him. He basically, there's mixed opinions on him. People either saw him as this genius or they saw him as this tyrant. So history has definitely differing opinions on Napoleon. So, okay, so this is time for you to read. If you have not finished your reading, please make sure you do that. Pages 352 to 360. That's incorrect. That is wrong. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry, I didn't change that slide. It actually is pages, that is wrong. It's the pages I told you in the beginning. 369 to 369 to 383. Okay, and then student guide pages, again, it was correct in the beginning. I'm sorry, this slide is actually wrong. Student guide pages 249 to 237 to 248. So let me go back here really quickly. Hang on. Actually, maybe I have it on here. Let's see if I have it on this next slide. It's here. It's in your OMS. So the student guide pages are 243 to 248, and the reading pages are 269 to 383. And remember, this is a recorded reading, so you can always listen to the reading there. This is the video for the flip video, so you can listen to that there. Okay. So before you start the quiz, there is a Duxter's link. It's on the Padlet. You can go ahead and take a look at that if you'd like. There also is a French Revolution Brain Pop movie, which I showed that at the beginning of class before we had the recording going, I think, but on Thursday. So that was an option for those of you that logged in early. Couple quick checks. How is the French Revolution different from the American Revolution? There was a tremendous amount of bloodshed and radicalism that led to the death of many citizens. Fighting was done mostly by French forces against forces of other countries, and it traded one regime with total control for another that would take total control. So the American Revolution was about people getting freedoms. The French Revolution started off that way, but unfortunately it was a monarchy that had control, and then kind of went to Napoleon, who had complete control. So it didn't quite end up as good as the American Revolution. Really quickly too here, I think, let me see what question. Yeah, question number 3 on your test says, which of the following is not a major position of the political spectrum? So really quickly here, before I end this video, I just want to talk about this political spectrum. I'm going to go ahead and show you a screen here for just a second. Hang on one second. Okay, so here's a quick example of these political positions on the political spectrum, and you will see this on question number 3 on your assessment. Okay, so just make sure you kind of make a mental note. So basically right here is moderate. This is basically the center of a political spectrum, and then as you move to the left, you're going to see a more liberal way of thinking, and then if you move to the far left, you're going to see a more radical way of thinking. Kind of same thing. If we come back here to moderate, you move to the right, you see a more conservative way of thinking. You move to the far right, you see a more reactionary way of thinking. So we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about these, but what you do need to know is basically right here in the middle is where you're kind of, as far as government goes, kind of you agree with both sides. You kind of have some from this side, some from that side. Kind of, there's a saying, comme ci, comme ça, kind of yin and yang. You're kind of, okay with both. As you move further away from the center, you either become more liberal, more free-thinking, more open kind of with your thoughts. As you move towards conservative, you come more used to kind of like a little bit of conservative. I want to use the word conservative, kind of a more older way of thinking, or more traditional way of thinking. That's probably a better word. And then, you get over to the reactionary, where it's kind of that extreme. So the radical is the extreme on the left side, on the liberal side. The reactionary is the extreme on the conservative, on the right side. And then the moderate is somewhere right in the middle. Okay. So these forms of the political spectrum would be radical, liberal, moderate, conservative, and reactionary. Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on from that. All right, so here we go. A tyrant is a cruel or oppressive ruler. Monarchy is a form of government with a monarch such as a king or a queen. An absolute monarch has total power. Republic is a form of government in which the power is held by the people and their elected representatives. and which has an elected or nominated president rather than a monarchy. Revolution is a forcible overthrow of government or social order in favor of a new system. So again, we've got this kind of chart here where we've got this, monarchy, and then we kind of move forward, monarchy, moderate, and we move to the left or to the right of that, okay? Reforms of the National Convention, free primary schooling for all boys and girls, equal inheritance for both sons and daughters, the right to vote for all French men, and slavery was made illegal in the French colonies. So those are reforms of the National Convention. Why was the church, for the most part, the Catholic Church, disliked? The Catholic Church in France was too wealthy. They had a lot of money. The church leaders were too powerful. And religion often ran contrary to reason. We talked about this on Thursday. Sometimes, or I think it was in the Flip video lesson, sometimes the religion was not always geared towards a better thing. It was geared towards what could be done better for self. And so it was kind of contrary to what religion was intended. Okay. All right. So we have come to the end of this recording. Thank you so much for listening. Since we didn't have regular class time, this takes up, about the time that we would do normally teaching. And then you have about 15 minutes to complete your quiz. So make sure that you've completed your readings in your book here. Make sure you've completed your student guide in here. Make sure that you have participated either in class on Thursday or, you've participated today as much as you could with this being a recording. And then you can go ahead and you can take your quiz 2.02, the French Revolution. The password is winter. So there is a password on it. The quiz will open at 12:30. You can go ahead and take it then. Those of you that have the afternoon class will open after, 1:30. So you can go ahead and take it. And if you have any questions, you can let me know. I should be back in class tomorrow. Like I said, I'm gone today. My son has a college visit, virtual visit. So I may be able to kind of check into class, but I'm not sure. But I thought I better make a recording just in case. Okay? All right. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you soon. Bye, guys.